Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle. Me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. Again, I remark about that name, Freemasonry and Satanism, and how those two words are connected. Some people might not think that they are, but then sometimes you're reading a book about that very subject, how they are related. Think about the powerful forces in the world right now. Number one, without a doubt, are the Jewish people. And I'm not going to try to say which is the most powerful of all. Number two would be the Vatican and leadership of other churches. Number three, the secret societies. And of course, the wealthy elite. And number five, the occult, the Kabbalah, sorcery, witchcraft groups. 5 powerful forces on the planet. And are they all connected? I say they are. Freemasonry and Satanism. Freemasonry, of course, is just one of many of these secret societies. Satanism is just another word for witchcraft and other types of magic, good or bad. They say there's something called black witches and white witches, and good shamans and maybe bad shamans. Shamans who learn all the secrets of nature, how to take different kinds of drugs or go into trances to communicate with the invisible realm. What's this all have to do with the aliens and UFOs we hear about? Secrets that they don't want to disclose to the rest of us. So this is series 171. And one of my commenters sent me something that he called a gift. He emailed my rickmiracle@yahoo.com email address and sent me a lot of PDF books. Some books you can't get. Actually, 2 or 3 of the ones he sent me I had already read and made videos on. So it was definitely in line with what I was talking about. This particular one that he sent me is Masonry Illustrated, the complete ritual of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. Masonry Illustrated, the complete ritual of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, profusely illustrated by a sovereign Grand Commander 33 degrees, with a historical sketch of the order introduced and critical analysis of each degree. President Blanchard of Wheaton College. Over 400 quotations from the standard Masonic authorities confirm the accuracy of the ritual and show the character of the Masonic teachings and doctrine. Volume 1. So I guess there's another volume or 2. 8th to 18th degree inclusive. And the year of this book, 1905. So what I do when I have to read from PDF files, I print out the pages and make a little binder, pre-read the material, so you can probably go online and find it. So I thought, because this name of my series is Freemasonry and Satanism, Masonry Illustrated, the complete ritual ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. I'm thinking about that ancient and accepted. I first saw these blue round signs, like stop signs when you come to a stop on the street, about that size. But they were blue and round, and it said on them, ancient and accepted Freemasonry. And they were periodically everywhere you went all over Maine. So I'm just wondering, two things. Are they putting us on some kind of legal notice? And secondly, the state I grew up in, Maine, is it a serious Freemasonic state? So I have come to some conclusions that Freemasonry was a creation of some Jewish men. And that's in this material. I'm also convinced the Jesuits, who apparently were started by Kabbalistic Jewish men, are in control, at least at the top, I don't know how deep it goes, of the Vatican, and all those organizations tied together encompass the economic banking system and the elites worldwide who have to conspire behind the scenes with lots of deceptions to keep we the people in the dark, to keep us from knowing the truth. So I read books and make these videos trying to find out WTH, what the heck is going on in the world? What is everything? Why are they doing revolutions and World War I and World War II, 9/11, and seemingly we people, we humanity, citizens, the Masons call us non-Masons profane, and of course the Jews call the non-Jews, not all Jews, but the Jews who are into the Kabbalistic Zionist people, call the non-Jews Goy and Goyim, which means cattle. So there's two exclusive categories. For the Freemasons, it's the non-Freemasons, profane. And for the Jews, it's the non-Jews called Goy or Goyim cattle. And there may be more groupings with names like that, but those two are pretty easy to verify. All right, so entered according to the Act of Congress in the year 1904 by Urza Cook in the Office of Librarian of Congress, Washington, D.C., and apparently this was the Harold R. Lee Library, Young University, Brigham Young University, Provo, Utah. I'll read a little bit of the preface here. Publisher's preface. Had not an extended trial demonstrated most clearly that in no way can the arguments against a secret order be put before the public so effectively as in close connection with the ritual thereof, I should not have ventured at great expense of publishing this illustrated ritual of the Scottish Rite. So this author wants to put the secret order be put before the public. Rituals sell readily to both lodge members and outsiders, while the most eloquent address on the subject, however, replete with important facts and arguments, seldom secures many readers. Although many members of any secret society would decidedly prefer to have the analysis of the degrees left out, and I have declined repeated offers to buy entire editions of 1,000 copies of different rituals at my regular rates, provided I would furnish them without note or comment. Not less than half of my sales of rituals are to members of these orders, and hundreds, when ordering a ritual, are careful to give their lodge connections. Supposedly, they could not otherwise get the desired ritual. Before I commence publishing this series of rituals, with footnotes, quotations, which it will be observed prove the substantial correctness of the ritual, in the form of skeleton exposition of the degrees, many members of these orders, when purchasing rituals, took pains to intimate or pronounce them incorrectly. So it tells you some of the books and sources here. I'll just hold it up. You can pause your computer if it's important to you. And has a table of contents, which is quite extensive. There's much more here, but like I said, you can probably find the PDF online. The next page has some contents like a fortune from selling Masonic degrees. So there was a lot of money made by initiates and people who were recruited to join the Freemasons and other secret societies. They have to pay dues and fees. And apparently it was quite lucrative. Another one here represents middle chamber of Solomon's temple. So this is about, you're going to hear when I read about King Solomon's temple, Jerusalem, the Knights Templars, Jackanail, a Gaelic corruption of Shekinah. I went through great lengths to look up Shekinah, and you can look this up for yourself. Quite interesting. Why it would be in this stuff, I have no idea, other than the fact I read it. But apparently, according to this sex and the Shekinah glory, sacred marriage, sex and the Shekinah glory, it's in this Freemasonry material, so I thought I'd take a moment. We're going to run across this word. Some things really get us excited. Having a baby is always an exciting time. You want to tell the world. As they grow and reach major milestones, we love to share with our friends, even strangers you meet at the grocery store, about your baby. Some things we don't like to talk about. We feel uncomfortable. Our faith in Christ is sometimes difficult to talk about. We have it, but we don't know how to express it. Sex is another one of those things we just don't talk about. It makes most of us uncomfortable. In fact, people that talk openly and honestly about sex makes us uncomfortable. So this author says, so I will make most of you uncomfortable at some point this morning. So I guess this is somebody's lecture on the Shekinah, and it's in the Encyclopedia Judaica. My talk with you this morning comes from a firm conviction that God is Lord in every aspect of our life. And because God is Lord in every aspect, He wants to be involved in everything we do. Everything. So let's ask Him to open our hearts and eyes, and how marvelous he is, and how marvelous a creation we are, let us do this before we have the dreaded talk. Okay, communion with the Shekinah glory. I'm going somewhere with this. So, communion with the Shekinah glory. And this symbol is one of the pieces of furniture in a Freemasonic lodge. So again, this is all appropriate. The Ark of the Covenant with the two cherubim angels on it. The Ark of the Testimony was constructed with two cherubim angels, hammered gold, each face each other and touch wings. In this joining of the two, Exodus 25-22 records. So that would be in the Old Testament. There above the corner between the two cherubim, that over the Ark of the Testimony, I, God, will meet with you. God's presence between the cherubim became a very popular Old Testament image. So when I read all this stuff, what comes to my mind is, who is the God of the secret societies or the Jewish Kabbalist into the occult? And is it a different God than the Father of Jesus and the God that the Christians pray to, and even the Orthodox Jewish people who didn't turn towards the other side, reformed? Just makes me wonder. So God's presence between the cherubim became a very popular Old Testament image. 1 Samuel 4.4. The Lord Almighty who is enthroned between the cherubim. Psalms 80.1. Hear us, O shepherd of Israel, you who sit enthroned between the cherubim. Isaiah 37.16. O Lord, Almighty God of Israel, enthroned between the cherubim. Hebrews 9.5. Above the ark were the cherubim of the glory. So the glory of God comes to us as the two beings that are being joined. God dwells in the midst of this coming together. So the two cherubim, the angels, are touching wings, and between the two angels is and they're standing on it, the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is supposed to contain the two tablets, the 10 Commandments from God. The first 4 commandments are the commandments between God and man, and the 6th commandments after that, equaling 10, are the commandments between men and men. So what I've been reading. 10 commandments. First 4 between God and man, the next 6 between man and man. And this Ark of the Covenant containing those tablets with the cherubim on top, if you open it, like if you watch the Indiana Jones movie, this ray comes out of it. And it goes around and kills everybody who is not blinded. And Indy and his girlfriend, they put some blindfolds on or didn't open their eyes. And there's a picture of that here. And again, I mentioned that in this video because this word is in that material. And so is the Ark of the Covenant as one of the pieces of furniture in the Freemasonic Lodge. Every town, every city, every country all over the world. So you can see the ray coming out of the Ark of the Covenant, the 2 angels on top. So indeed, the basis of communication with God is always His glory. At the mercy seat, we have fellowship with God. We are shadowed by the cherubim of glory. There is the glory of God because the shed blood has made our forgiveness possible. And I am aware of the shed blood, like Jesus died on the cross so our sins could be forgiven, or even with the Jewish people being accused of blood libel, sacrificing humans. I noticed that in a lot of this material about King Solomon's temple, there are facilities there for sacrifices. And there have been other accusations. You can go see some of this on YouTube videos of the Illuminati sacrificing people, even the witchcraft organizations across the United States, and I suspect the world, where they might even drive down a city street in a van and screech over, pull over, and grab a person off the street, a young girl maybe, and take her back to their temple, which could be in somebody's garage, and have a sacrifice. Even in the series 161 in the Book of the Hopi, apparently they were sacrificing young virgins, daughters of the king, every 4 years. Mayans in New Mexico, the Yucatan, and all over the world. So this is not something new about sacrificing, but it is something that we should acknowledge if we're going to get to the bottom of WTH. What the heck? Through the blood God, though the blood God can show mercy without violating his glory, he can commune with man without violating himself. I'm just reading a little bit here to make a point. When I commune with God at his mercy seat, it is not on the precious blood I gaze, but on his glory. The veil has been stripped away. Sinful man can behold the glory of God. The strict law of God has met the atoning blood of Jesus Christ. We are one and at peace with this awesome holy God. Most of our holiest moments have been alone with God. We simply do not know how to enter into this intimacy with others. I can count on 2 hands when I have gazed on the glory of God. In communion with others, this is very, very sad. Jesus revealed a very important truth that the church has forgotten and marriages have forgotten. We may know it, but we rarely express it. Jesus said Christianity is meant to be shared in intimacy with God. Matthew 18.19-20. Christ offered this glimpse of the glory of God. Again I say unto you, that if 2 of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that it shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. For there were 2 or 3 that gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst of them. So these are biblical sayings. If 2 or more people gather in Jesus' name or God's name and pray, he shall be there. Most of us quote this verse and believe it a formula for getting God to do what we want. One of us will pray and another will say, yes, I agree. And we expect God to do what we ask. But we miss the true meaning of this verse because we missed what Jesus was revealing. All right, so there's a point here I wanted to make. I'm going to skip a few pages and try to get to that point. So they're going to say here, part 2 in this thing that I found online that you can go look up. Sex and the Shekinah glory. Sex from different perspectives. Our bodies are not barriers to grace. If we could truly accept this, then we would know God even in the ambiguous delights of our sexuality. Now, church is the last place you expect to hear about sex. Sometimes I misspeak. Now, church is the last place you expect to hear about sex. Depending on your age and your parents' attitude, your idea of sex can range from dirty and disgusting, something you have to do, and it's no big deal. Understand that regardless how you see sex, as a Christian, you need to have a biblical understanding of sex and why God made us sexual beings. So there's another picture here. Sex from different viewpoints. Jewish view. Sex is a gift from God. Sex enables us to partner with God and in an act of creation. See where I'm going with this? We're starting to circle around sexual magic. And of course the world with the rainbow agenda, new age, gay marriage, and transgenderism, etc. There's something we need to be aware of. Yada, to know implies intimate knowledge. And according to what I understand, even in Rabbi Marvin Antelman's book, the people who were into this Kabbalah mysticism, into the dark side, I would say, would invite a neighbor over to have sex with his wife in front of him, and while he watched, he would gain great intelligences. He would become smarter and a genius. Go watch my videos on Rabbi Marvin Antelman. And even with Aleister Crowley, the book of the law, do as thou wilt. The second law is referred to number 1, do as thou wilt. And they had sexual orgies to do sexual magic, invoking some beings maybe. Even when Moses came down the mountain with the 2 tablets from God, the Jews had gathered all of the gold together and made a golden calf and were having a drunken sexual orgy. Moses smashed the tablet. They were practicing some religious rite from the Pharaohs or the Egyptians' religion, where they had been so-called captive for a long time. So I was wondering why Shekinah was in this book and this thing about the divine glory. And when you have sex, invite the divine glory into your body, from what I've been reading here, so that the God in the sky can enjoy the sex too. I know I'm going out on a cliff here with this conversation, but I look up these words. To the Jews, sex was a gift from God, whereby they fulfilled the Abrahamic covenant to become as numerous as the stars. Sex was reserved between a man and his wife. Sex was important for the family to multiply and extend the name of God in the world. Sex was not only about procreation. In the Mishnah, this is another Jewish book we'll be going over eventually, Jewish wives were given 3 fundamental rights: food, clothing, and the right of honor. Food, clothing, sexual intercourse apart from their duty of procreation. I'm just going to read a little more and get on to my Freemasonry Illustrated, an in-depth review published in 2005 that has this word and other references to the Jewish religion. So I think it's important to have this in the back of our mind as we move forward. And I read all this other material. I did not read this material in depth, but I'm only reading a couple pages of these 16 pages you can go look up. Jewish Rabbi Nomanides, who wrote, I think, the book, The Guide to the Perplexed, and I've been reading that, wrote in the 13th century, he proclaimed sex as a mystery meeting with God. Through the act of intercourse, they become partners with God in the act of creation. This is the mystery of what the sages said. When a man unites with his wife in holiness, the Shekinah is between them in the mystery of the man and the woman. The breadth of this statement is sobering when you consider that Shekinah glory, that beam coming up out of the Ark of the Covenant, or the rays from the heavens, is the same presence Moses experienced when God met with him face to face. And when Moses went up to the mountain as he was escorting or guiding the Jews away from Egypt, and then of course to get the 2 tablets and speaking with God. And when he came down, all the Jews had gathered together their gold and were worshiping a golden calf in a drunken orgy, part of the religion. Just biblical stories a lot of people may not know and a lot of people do know. We are possessors of the Holy Torah, believe that God, we the possessors of the Holy Torah, believe that God, may he be praised, created all. As his wisdom decreed, did not create anything ugly or shameful. For if sexual intercourse were repulsive, then the reproductive organs are also repulsive. If the reproductive organs are repulsive, how did the Creator fashion something blemished? If that were so, he would find that his deeds were not perfect. The Torah uses the term yada, to know, to indicate a sexual relationship. Sex is thus considered more than a biological act. It involves intimate knowledge shared by 2 human beings. To most Jews, sex was a gift from God, whereby they could have a sacred family and propagate the world for the glory of Jehovah. Sex was good, nothing to be ashamed of, as long as it was done properly between a husband and wife. So there's much more here to read, and I'll maybe go back to this document in a while. But I thought I would look at that word Shekinah and something to do with having sex with your spouse in holiness, bringing God into your relationship so that even God can enjoy the sexual experience also, or communicate with people, whatever. If you think it's bizarre to me. But I'm going to read from the other book here, Freemasonry Illustrated. So it did have in there the Gaelic corruption of the Shekinah. I'll show you this page. My red line there you can see. The masonry erected of the superstructure of geometry. I'm not reading all the lines here. Going into the lodge as a frog into a snake's mouth. Going into the lodge. Imagine you get initiated into a Freemasonic lodge. It's like going into a snake's mouth. I just read and report. Moore's description of false religions. So there's many more pages here. You can go online. If you can't find it, maybe you could let me know and I could put it in my website or something. I was thinking about creating a page just for PDF documents, as I've been collecting them since 2005 when I began my research. I can't even think about how much material I have. So there's pages and pages of this table of contents. Here on page 18 it says, every lodge is a synagogue of Satan. That's what it says here, and because it's so outrageous, I'll highlight it right now and show it to you. I put a red line there. So we're connecting some dots here, Shekinah, sex is about holy union with God, so he can enjoy the enjoyment we have. And every synagogue is a synagogue of Satan, every lodge. There's so much more here, but I do want to get reading this thing so we can share. I'm going to start now with the introduction. If all the volcanoes in our globe were uncapped, there would be no more earthquakes, and millions of men and money would be saved. It is the object of this volume to uncap the moral volcanoes slumbering under every American institution. It is the object of this volume to uncap the moral volcanoes slumbering under every American institution. The secret lodge undermines the college by concealing its rowdyism and sheltering its rebellions, the courthouse by its rival oaths, the legislature by corrupting and intimidating its members, and the church by its rival mock sacraments, all of which will appear proved in this volume. I do realize that to try to get anywhere, trying to figure out what's going on in our reality, it's a tedious job. I get it. So sometimes when you listen to the material I put out there in these videos, or you go get some books and read them like I have done, or watch other videos, or go to websites, get yourself a notebook or some kind of library system where you collect books and notebooks and pictures. And take a while, because it does take a while to just get a glimpse into understanding reality. Because a lot of people want to find what they read or what they see as totally unbelievable that they refuse to accept it. There's a word for that called normalcy bias. If it's not normal, you want to reject it. That's how your brain works. But apparently, there are doing things behind the scenes, especially with all these satanic rituals we see, whether it's singing stars like Miley or Bieber and many others, Madonna, Beyonce, Lady Gaga, the Emmys, Grammys, Super Bowl halftime shows, tunnel openings, singing organizations like Eurovision, where they have the person with Jesus' head and the woman in the silky body, Conchita Wurst, winning the contest, singing the song The Phoenix Rising, which has the words "You Can't Stop Us," like the American Idol program. I'm saying it's so vast, but this book's going to reveal some very interesting things. So we already know a lot of people do that. Our politicians and the judges and the legislators and all these people are selected individuals, although they try to fool us by letting us vote for a Democrat or Republican. It's all controlled by the same puppet master, by these secret societies. And as I read on here, you're going to see that's pretty clear. And these people have made agreements or belong to these occult organizations. So it says here, the legislator by corrupting and intimidating its members, and the church by its rival mock sacraments, all of which will appear proved in this volume. Even the churches seem to want to compete with each other, forcing people like me or you to choose this church. Hey, am I going to be a Baptist? Am I going to be a Protestant? Am I going to be a Lutheran? Am I going to be a Catholic? Should I switch over to the Muslim religion, Islam? Should I become a Jew or a Buddhist or Hindu or atheist or whatever? It boggles the mind, and I think maybe that's part of the intent. A condensed account of the Scottish Rite, which is now, say all their writers, the most popular and most widely diffused. So the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry apparently is the most popular and most widely diffused, and that would be in the Mackey Encyclopedia, page 697. Stonemasons had initiated, i.e. hazed. We all know what hazing is, like a group of boys in a baseball team, football team, getting, a new member joins, or a fraternity in a college. They haze them. We've seen TV programs about that. So stonemasons had initiated, i.e. hazed, their apprentices, journeymen, and master masons. At York, England, these three initiations were woven into a rite. So when they recruited people into the Masons in England, they were hazed, and they turned this into a rite or a ritual. AD 926, so almost 900 years after Jesus, which overran England. So this hazing of these initiates overran England and is now the basis of all Masonic rites, giving them their names in spirit. In 1649, Charles I was beheaded, the king, and his queen and son Charles II were exiled in France, where there was no centralized lodged power. But Charles II secretly joined both the Papists and the Masons. So the high level of the Vatican, the Pope, were probably secret occult organizations also, as well as the Masons. So the King of France, because his father was beheaded and they were exiled, joined the Papists and the Masons. And by the aid of the French Masons, who were Papist, so these Masons were Catholic, and English Masons who were Protestants. So it didn't matter if you were Catholic or Protestant in England, and Catholic in France. He regained his father's throne. So with the assistance, and this is very important, of the Protestant Masons in Britain and the Catholic Masons in France, he regained his father's throne. Is the King of France. Was pensioned by the French king, who was then called the eldest son of the Romish Church, reigned disgracefully for 25 years. So this guy was put in charge of France, was a king again after his father was beheaded, and he was called the eldest son of the Romish Church from Rome, and he reigned disgracefully for 25 years and died gazing on a silver cross held before his eyes by a Romish priest named Huddleston in 1685. 3 years afterwards, 1688, England was revolutionized. Revolutionized is another word for civil war. And the Civil War was contrived and instigated, created by some people behind the scenes, as you'll see in this material. Secret societies caused the Civil War for intentional purposes of taking over the country and gaining more power, and they called them revolutions. It's like they're trying to start a civil war in the United States now, so it seems. They're causing all this divide and conquer propaganda. And they'll call it a revolution like it is a normal activity, which is, it's anything but the truth. They're trying to cause a lot of changes in our reality. So 3 years afterwards, 1688, England was revolutionized. Somebody created all this terrorism and corruption to cause a civil war where a lot of people were murdered. A lot of property changed hands. James, the brother of Charles, fled from his throne and people and took headquarters at the Jesuits College of Clermont in Paris. So now we're involving the Jesuits of the Catholic Church, the Papists, with the Freemasons, and they are connected. The Freemasons were created by some Jewish folks. The Jesuits appear to be created by some Jewish folks. And I did go over that one video, the Black Pope. And apparently right now, the Pope Francis is a high-leading Jesuit. A lot of people suspect he's the Black Pope, which means they're preparing the church and apparently the world for a revolution worldwide. World War III. This college thenceforward became a factory of higher Masonic degrees. So the Jesuit College of Clermont became a factory of higher Masonic degrees. To govern English lodges and restore James and Popery to the throne, as Charles II had been restored before. So you can see how these organizations are working in cahoots with each other to be in positions of power. They are not separate and fighting each other as they would have we the people think, from my research. Meantime, Masonry was changed. In 1717, at the Apple Tree Tavern, London, as is well known, 4 old lodges formed the first Grand Lodge, dropping craft masonry and accepting all who would pay dues. So they got rid of the masonry for masons who actually used cement and a trowel and chipped stone to make buildings. And now they're accepting anybody who is willing to pursue the degrees and who would pay dues. And they did all this in the Apple Tree Tavern, the bar in London. And all who would pay dues promised to fit them for heaven. So they were training these young men, initiating them, so they would be fitted, their souls would be grown so they could get into heaven. Even the Catholic Church, they have been accused of people being able to buy their way into heaven and pay money to have their sins forgiven. The lodge above, that is to say, they set up a false religion with a despotic constitution of government and salvation as ceremonies, but omitting the Savior, Jesus, and the Holy Ghost. This horrible compound, now falsely called Masonry, was in operation while the sons of the fugitive, James II, were exile pretenders to the English throne, living by Masonry and plotting with the Jesuits in France. So maybe I was wrong earlier. This Charles I and Charles II were kings of Britain, English, and they had escaped to France at this College of Clermont. There now appears on the scene the chief manufacturer of Masonry as it now exists, viz. The ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of 33 degrees. There is no other than the Chevalier Ramsay. This is no other than the Chevalier Ramsay of Hummaki. So this well-known man named Ramsay. I guess a Chevalier Ramsay would be like some kind of knight. Hummaki, the leading lexicographer, jurist, and historian of the lodge, says, "No one played a more important part in the history of Freemasonry in the 18th century than the Chevalier Ramsay." Trying to think what Chevalier would be. I'm probably saying the name wrong. I'm thinking like the Three Musketeers. They were chivalrous and out there trying to battle wrong and defend the honor of women. He was indeed the most learned man who up to that time had taken any interest in the order. Ramsay was a brilliant young Scotch Presbyterian from Scotland, of course familiar with the Bible, which he garbled, traversed, and corrupted to manufacture Masonic degrees. So he used the Bible to create these Masonic degrees. He was the son of a baker, educated in Edinburgh University. He afterward became a companion of kings, priests, and pretenders, amassed great wealth, and apostatized from Protestantism to Rome. So he changed religion, I guess, to being a Catholic. He was 20 years old when James II threw the mace into the Thames and fled to Paris. He went to Holland and under a popular enthusiast, Pierre Perrault, that's an interesting name, plunged into the tenets of the mystical theology, witchcraft, then widely prevailing. So the tenets of the mystical theology, then widely prevailing, and we all remember the Inquisition or the burnings of witches in Europe. I have to check the dates to see if this coincides with it, but it seems like it does. In 1710, he had lived 6 months in the family of the mystical papist. So you got a priest from the Catholic Church who was into the mystical application. I call it witchcrafts just so we can understand it, but it's mystical papist. Fenelon, Archbishop of Cambrai, with whom he was apostasy to Romanism, became complete. So he spent some time with this Archbishop to become a Roman Catholic. He had before been, in the words of Ribold, the instrument of the Jesuits, framing Masonic degrees. So he was the instrument of the Jesuits, framing Masonic degrees, and plotting the restoration of the Stuarts. That would putting the Stuarts back on the crown in Britain. He became tutor to the 2 sons of the first pretender, Charles Edward and Henry. So these kings that were on the throne, I guess, were called the pretenders. Just these little tidbits of things to think about. His heart seemed to be cleaved to the bonny Scotland. So he was missing his homeland in Scotland. He called his first invented degree Scotch. He offered fortunes to his relatives, but they spurned him and his money gained by apostasy, but by the sale of sham dignities and from the pay of the Catholic kings, priests, princes, and pretenders. So his family and friends spurned him because where he got his fortune. The success of Charles II in recovering his father's throne, his long reign, and the powerful backing of the French king, the Pope, and the Jesuits. So he retained the throne, reacquired the throne with the powerful backing of the French king, the Pope, and the Jesuits. Reobtained the throne in Britain, exalted their hopes to the highest. So they put this guy in charge of the kingdom of Britain. Adventurers flocked to them, and for a time, Masonry was the rage in France. And Ramsay was at its head center. He told them, nobilis, he told the French nobiles, so the French nobles, who despised a masonry derived from stonemasons, mechanics, that his new degrees were brought from Palestine, here we go, in the time of the Crusades, but returned princes, priests, knights, and nobles. So they were getting rid of this stonemasonry mechanics and substituting it for some magic, witchcraft, Kabbalah material that they obtained in Palestine from the times of the Crusades. And in 1740, as its grand orator, speaker, he pronounced a discourse before the Grand Lodge of France, manufacturing history as he went on, and the falsehood was greatly swallowed, greedily swallowed. So it was rewriting human history, religion, and everything. And it was greedily swallowed by the French nobles and apparently other nobles all over the world. And the marvel is, if anything Masonic can be marvelous, that while the mass of fundamental lying is admitted and recorded by Mackey, McCoy, Flogger, and the other Masonic authors, so all these famous authors are admitting the lying, fundamental lying, deceiving we the people. What else is new? They seem to deem falsehoods no disparagement to pure Masonic morality and truth. One has only to glance over their pages to see all the facts just given here. When France had been sown with the new degrees, it became necessary to codify and condense. So this Masonry was spreading in France. Ramsay digested a code of 6 degrees called the Ramsay Rite, which he attempted to foist on the English, but without success. The gunpowder plot of 1605 was believed by the British masses to have resulted from the Romish doctrine that Protestants have no rights which Papists are morally bound to respect beyond what policy dictates. So the Catholics, Roman Catholics, were opposed to the Protestants, and that's why the Protestants were called Protestants. They were protesting the way that the church in Rome was administrating the religion, Protestants. For 3 centuries, Romish priests did not concentrate a burial ground on the soil of England. So there was a battle between Catholic Church in Italy and France, etc., and England with its Protestants. The Stuarts sunk to rise no more. So apparently the Stuarts, who were the leaders or the kings of England, sunk, and England with none of Stuart Masonry. But the flood from the mouth of the dragon flowed on. Wow, listen to that sentence. But the flood from the mouth of the dragon flowed on. Revelation 12.15. The Chevalier de Bonneville in 1754 formed a chapter of Clermont in the Jesuit college of that name with the rite of perfection of the 25 degrees. But Masonry was a troubled sea whose waters cannot rest, but cast up myrrh and dirt. After an agitated existence of 4 years, this Clermont chapter was merged in a council of emperors of the East and the West, which outbragged all before it. The members called themselves Sovereign Prime Masons, Sovereign Prince Masons. Again, I apologize for the eye sees one thing and the mouth speaks another thing. The Sovereign Prince Masons, substitutes general of the royal arts and the grand superintendents of the Grand and Sovereign Lodge of St. John of Jerusalem. Here we go. Jerusalem. These are issues that are very appropriate to what's going on in the world today. Look what 911 enabled the elites to do. They've overthrown most of the countries in the Middle East, if not all, toppled the leaders and installed their puppet masters, have been bombing and incinerating and machine gunning the citizens ever since. even before 9/11. And part of World War I and World War II, this was also the aim of taking over the world and toppling people and taking wealth and riches from certain people and giving it to these Jesuit, Papist, Freemasonic kings and queens, people ruling our world, to try to condense that whole thing into a comprehensible conversation. Because if you pay attention here, and there's more here for me to say, a lot of this is going to make sense. 3 years after this, in 1761, this August bubble, or the Council of Emperors, which itself burst a few years afterwards, gave Stephen Moran, his name's going to be very important, over and over. So these Council of Emperors of the East and the West, in 1761, gave Stephen Morin, M-O-R-I-N, a Jew who cared nothing for his religion. And I kept thinking, why would they put that sentence in there? Freemasonry, the material, is similar to the Kabbalah, which is the historic religion of a lot of Jews. You can call it the Hermetic teachings, Rosicrucian. I call it witchcraft, so we can all understand. It's secrets of natural science, things they know that the rest of us don't know, and they use it against us, hence I call it witchcraft. So they gave to this Stephen Morin, a Jew, who cared nothing for his religion, which I rather doubt is true, and was so willing to adopt the Ramsey Rite of Perfection. So they gave control over these Masonic institutions to this Stephen Morin, a Jew, and to adopt the Ramsey Rite of Perfection, which Masonically exalts Christ in some of the degrees. So there is a difference between saying Jesus Christ and Christ. If you say Jesus Christ, you're saying that Jesus is the anointed one. If you just use the word Christ, you're talking about an anointed one, but which anointed one? So Masonically exalts Christ in some of the degrees, if only like his ancestors, Judas, he might sell him for silver. So Judas, one of the 12 apostles of Jesus, of course sold Jesus, betrayed him for some silver. This mock Council of Emperors gave to this Jew, Stephen Morin, power to establish this Ramsey Rite of Perfection in every part of the world. Did you hear me? This Council of Emperors gave to this Jew, Stephen Morin, the power to establish the Ramsey Rite of Perfection in every part of the world. This Jew came to Charleston, South Carolina, via San Domingo, and started what is now the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. Now, how many people know this stuff? The leading rite of the world. A detailed account of Morin's work in Charleston, South Carolina, is given in the analysis of the fourth degree. After appointing a Deputy Inspector General for North America, completing his American work, and appointing some other inspectors for the West Indies, Morin disappears from history. No one knows when he died or where he was buried. Of the first 16 Deputy Inspector Generals appointed by this Stephen Morin, a Jew, 13 of them were Jews. So this one Jew who was given the authority by the Council of Emperors to come to America and the world to establish all these Masonic organizations, the first 16 deputy inspectors who would further, like a pyramid, create all kinds of other organizations and be the leaders, 13 were Jews, according to this book here, page 24. See Fogler's History, page 38. So this author references, remember this book was published in 1905. There I go misspeaking again. 1905. From the advent of Morin in 1762, there is a gap in some years in which Masonic history is silent and confused. The struggle for American independence, this is all connected. Listen up. The struggle for American independence was then beginning, and a long war which established it took place at this period. So even George Washington is portrayed almost like a god in the Freemasonic lodges. Big pictures of him with his apron and all his Freemasonic memorabilia. And even the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. has a statue of George Washington sitting on a throne with his hands like the devil in the tarot card, pointed up and down like this. As above, so below. Go look up the tarot card or the devil, bafflant, and you'll see all these demons doing that. And of course, there's an all-seeing eye and a snake on George Washington's chair. And notwithstanding the fact there's a George Washington monument, which is a big obelisk, which is a phallic unit, the missing part from Osiris after being cut into 17 parts. And Isis went all over the world and collected 16 parts and put them back together, except one part was missing, the phallic unit. The obelisk, it's part of some sun god religion, which I can relate to being satanic, Luciferic, Ra, Isis, Moloch, the Bohemian Grove, and all these occult symbolisms and rituals we're seeing is part of this one religion. If I learned anything in my 13 years of research, going on 14 years coming up, is that seems to be the connection I am finding. And when you read here, listen to me read or get the document yourself, you're going to see the same thing. Once you kind of know what's going on, it helps you put two and two together. All right, on to the second hour, or about 55 more minutes. I'll get as far as I can into this material. The struggle for American independence was then beginning, and the long war which established it took place at that period. So Freemasonry is introduced into America. The Jewish person Stephen Morin established the first lodge in Charleston, South Carolina, chose 16 deputy inspector generals, leaders, and 13 of them were Jewish people. Some really explosive material coming up. And all Masonic writers agree that the 25 degrees brought over by Morin were rearranged, each other degree added, 8 other degrees added, and in 1801, the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite was formed, as it now stands, consisting of 33 degrees, and the first Supreme Council was opened in Charleston, South Carolina, by John Michael and Frederick Dulcio in 1801, which system now leads all others. So this was in 1905 this book was published, and apparently it's still the same today in 2017. Next year, 1802, this rite traveled back to Europe. And though an American invention, and through its founder Morin, had only received power to confer the 25 degrees, which were the old Ramsey Jesuit rite of perfection. So the Jesuits, which were also apparently created by a Jewish man, created also the Ramsey rites or the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. And though he was branded as an audacious juggler and himself had been recalled, and his patent taken away and given to Brother Martin in 1766 by the power that gave it. This is in Fogler, page 38. Documents. Still Moron went on constituting chapters and councils all the same. So he was forming all these lodges everywhere. In 1783, 17 years after his recall and his patent had been annulled, he erected in Charleston the Grand Lodge of Perfection. And Reagan says, the Prince Masons of Charleston, the Prince Masons in Charleston, were at first all Jews. Did you hear me? The Prince Masons in Charleston were at first all Jews, not satisfied with the rite of perfection, consisting of 25 degrees in 1801, added 8 degrees more, making the 33 degrees, and constituted themselves the Supreme Scottish Council of America and the French possessions. So these Jewish people created the Supreme Scottish Council of America and the French possessions. That's kind of odd. John Michael and Frederick Dulce were the only members of the first Supreme Council of Charleston who were not Jews. These facts are given by Fogler, page 41 and 42. Attested also by Reagan, Theory, and Cavell. See Mackey's Encyclopedia Art Morin. So this author is referencing these well-known famous books. But what was to be done? The Council of Emperors, which commissioned Morin, Council of Emperors, think about who they might be, was extinct, and its patent had annulled by the Grand Lodge of France, and he had never had even any Masonic authority to invent the degrees and create a council. This is what they did. They forged and found some constitutions, which they said were given by Frederick the Great of Prussia, dated in 1786, the year of Frederick's death at 74 years of age. He had long been incapable of business. So apparently these lodges were formed without any authority. So they fabricated some constitutions and a document coming from this Frederick the Great on his deathbed. And of these spurious constitutions, which Claus in his history pronounces the grand lie of the order, these infidel Jews with Michael and Dulce, who were not Jews, founded the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, which now owns the temples and rules Freemasonry in America and Europe. Oh my. Thus we have given from Masonic authorities a full-length moral portrait of the present leading system of Masonry in the United States and Europe. And I might add, like George Bush of the Skull and Bones, another secret society, this is where all of our leaders come from. I've gone over the book review written by President John Quincy Adams, Letters on Freemasonry. Go watch my video on his book. And back when they first established the United States of America, the 13 colonies, there were two political parties, the Masons and the Anti-Masons. It's interesting. So the Jesuits created the Masons. The Jesuits were Catholic. The two political parties were Masons and Anti-Masons. The Anti-Masons were Catholic. The Masons were Masons, which were created by Jewish Jesuits. So they created the illusion of opposition to control America, which they do today with the Republican and Democratic Party, the liberals and conservatives. Neither party, the Republicans and the Democrats, are liberal or are they conservative. They seem to be deceivers, in my opinion. And the Freemasonry of today is the child of Jesuitism, born in France when France was so saturated with lodgisms that even the true-hearted Lafayette was drawn into. And even in Nestor Webster, on several of her books I've already gone over and made videos, the Jewish people were behind the revolutions, you can call them civil wars, the instigation where people were killing each other, instigation, and losing my train of thought there. Even in the Encyclopedia Judaica, it says that the many Jewish people had a propensity or a natural calling to be involved in revolutions and stirring up troubles that would see people being murdered by the thousands, maybe millions. And of course, not all Jewish people. There is a difference between the God, Jesus' Father, and Jesus accusing the Jews when he overthrew the money changers' tables, saying to them, "Ye are of your father the serpent." And the serpent in the Garden of Eden. I don't have to go on. There's serpents, gargoyles on buildings all over the world. The serpent is a universal symbol everywhere. All kinds of secret societies use the serpent. How dense do we have to be to not see what one person calls God and these other secret societies call God might and likely are not the same God? So his apron is now shown. Lafayette was also drawn into this. He was a true-hearted man. His apron is now shown as a relic in the House of Washington at Mount Vernon in the United States. As Lamartine tells us in the Revolution of 1789 to 1992, I suspect that's the French Revolution, that the Freemason lodges were the catacombs of the new worship. So the lodges were the catacombs of the new worship. This was this religion, which the material appears to be based on the Kabbalistic and Helena Blavatsky's secret doctrine teachings. The Gorodist, Volume 1, page 188 is where that information came from. We shall now give a historic sketch of this reigning rite and see what this new worship was. Wow. All right, now I'm going up to chapter 1, the historic sketch of the ancient and accepted Scottish rite. So there's some key words here, like you might want to call them meta tags in a internet search engine. But here's some key words that are here. I'll show you the page. All right. Chapter 1. This rite is now in the ascendant throughout the Masonic world. So this rite is growing, the ascendant. It's not going down. It consists of 33 degrees, counting the 3 old York Rite degrees, entered apprentice, fellow craft, master mason, which 3 degrees are the basis of all the Masonic rites. This 33-degree rite is one of the latest among many attempts to construct a chain of degrees to bind together, tax, and govern the lodges of the world. So when we think about this New World Order, New Age, and another word that's been used lately, becoming popular, is globalism. And here we see these binding together and govern the lodges of the world. And the lodges of the world are under the control of the masters, supreme masters, and they become the politicians and leaders all over the world. So that gives these groups some incredible power. And it includes the Vatican and the Jesuits and thousands of organizations I've discovered. And the religion, I guess from the Kabbalah, is the religion of the New Age, which appears to be Lucifer and other god names worship, which everybody will be made to swear allegiance to, or might be beheaded. If you go look up on the internet or watch my videos, you will see that the government in the United States purchased 30,000 guillotines and much more evidence indicating this thing is about to come about. The Convent Garden Grand Lodge, formed at the Apple Tree Tavern, London, in 1717, was such an attempt. 4 decayed lodges of working masons, accustomed to initiate their apprentices, journeymen, and masters in a night's drinking carousal, met at that tavern in February, and on the 24th of June formed the first Grand Lodge and assumed usurped power to charter, tax, and govern the Masons of the world by declaring irregular all lodges not chartered by themselves. So these people who were running the lodge out of a tavern, a bar, and recruiting new initiates, getting them for a night's drinking carousal, now took control of the lodges association all over the world. And as they could withdraw such charters as were given by themselves, and so destroy or cast out Masonry, all lodges so chartered, their despotisms was complete. So their crime was complete. And all over all those who were chartered by them. Crazy stuff here. This upsurption, so they usurped power, and imposition was successful. In 21 years, Freemasonry, I get tired of speaking after a while, had spread into France, Ireland, Germany, Switzerland, the United States, Saxony, Belgium, Holland, Spain, Portugal, Turkey, Asia, Africa, and New Holland, and a few years later, it had spread throughout Christendom. Wow. The success of this swindle encouraged others. As a small specimen of such enterprises, a few years since, 2 adventurers invented and were selling a new side degree to Masons in Peoria, Illinois, when one of them stole the money and ran off. So a lot of people saw a business opportunity to open up these lodges, just like these New Age occult groups are popping up everywhere, have popped up everywhere. And just like so many other things, secret societies, they're making a lot of money. They suck people into this stuff, promising them secrets of the mysteries. Well, we're going to teach you how to get your soul prepared to get to heaven. Pay some money, you can be forgiven of your sins. And of course, we know with the Freemasons, they swear under threat of death not to divulge the secrets of the lodges and to assist one another whenever, wherever possible, even if they're accused of robbery or murder or whatever. The other applied to a lawyer, saying mournfully, so these people who created a lodge in Peoria, Illinois, one of the owners or creators ran off with the money. And one of the people who were still there at the lodge says to his lawyer, if the fella hadn't been a fool, we were making money so fast that in a short time his half would have been more than all his that he has stolen. So if the guy hadn't have stolen the money, if he'd have just stayed with the leadership of the lodge, he'd have had more money. By such swindling adventurers, degrees increased so rapidly that Rebold says there were several thousand at one time practiced in France. Several thousand lodges in France. As soon as the increase of degrees and dues had tempted ambition and greed, attempts had been made to grasp universal lodge dominion. So they had some kind of corporate trying to take over all the lodges. Hostile takeovers like corporations have. This was attempted by Wusthof in 1777. Here we go. He was under the guidance of the Rothschilds, which apparently that group is called the Illuminati, bloodlines of the Illuminati, with all the reptilian statues and everything. You got to know what religion they are. The reptilian statues, the serpent. This was attempted by Wusthof in 1777, by Frederick II, or others in his name, in Berlin in 1786, by the Grand Orient, and indeed by every considerable Masonic body. Attempts have been made to seize the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them, which were pro-offered by Satan to Christ, as an inducement to devil worship. So when Satan did, according to the Bible, did somehow abduct Jesus, take him to the top of some mountain, and said to Jesus, all of this I will give to you, my kingdom. That's what Satan says, of earth. If you will get down on one knee to me, get down on your knees. And Jesus said, of course, in my Father's kingdom there are many mansions. I don't need this whole world. So apparently the reptilian beings, bloodlines, whatever they are, they offered it to Jesus if he would kneel down to them, to him. And apparently this was a similar situation. The kingdoms of the world and the glory of them, somebody wanted to control all the Freemasonic lodges, which controls all the governments of the world and creates all the power for the elite. And using a lot of lower level members as dupes, initiates, fools. They're seeking some mystery, like witchcraft, and they're paying money every month for every degree. What a scam. Such an attempt to seize universal dominion in this ancient and accepted Scottish rite of 33 degrees, in which E. Junius Edwards, Commander-in-Chief of the Grand Consistory of Minnesota, says, Number 12, 1885, November 12, 1885, all the Supreme Councils of the world have finally adopted this schedule. Hence the importance of this volume. McCoy's Encyclopedia says of this rite, the ancient and accepted Scottish rite was, for the most part, elaborated from the system invented by this Ramsay. In the historical analysis of the 4th and 5th degrees of this volume will be found quotations from Mackey, McCoy, Roybold, Folger, and Morris, whose authority as Masonic writers is unquestioned. So these famous people who wrote on the Freemasons, their authority and information is unquestioned. In ample proof of the fact that this Scottish rite had its origin in the brains and breast of an apostate Presbyterian, renegade tyrants, Jews who retained nothing of Judaism. Why do they keep saying that? But they kept their hatred of Christ. So if they kept their hatred of Christ, they certainly didn't give up their Judaism religion. Associated with Jesuits, conspiring against the liberties of Europe and for the overthrow of the government of France. And its first home in this country was the city of nullification, secession, and rebellion in Charleston, South Carolina in 1801, where 13 Jews and 3 Protestants, Michael, Dulcio, and Provost, who had received it from France, falsely pretended to found it on the constitution given by Frederick the Great. Alright, a comment made here. If Satan had picked the time, the inventors, and home of this rite, he would have doubtlessly chosen the same. So if the devil were to do this himself, he would have done it just like they did it, according to this author. French principles prevailed. Jefferson was first inaugurated, having defeated John Adams in 1801, the year when the Charleston Council was born. Aaron Burr, who came near defeating Jefferson, was plotting to divide, hear me now, the infant Union, United States, raising troops in the Southwest. And both Bernard and Gasset say he used the Royal Arch of Freemasonry cipher to cover his treason, for which Jefferson after which took him to court, imprisoned him, and tried him. Morin's Jews with Michael Dolcho that same year, 1801, took Ramses and his Jesuit rite of perfection and added 8 degrees, made it the ancient and accepted Scottish rite. So back then, did you hear me what I said? These Freemasons, created by these 16 people chosen, inspector generals, 13 of them were Jewish people, and these other people were plotting to divide the infant Union. This is before the Civil War. This is in 1801. And we know what happens a little later. So they called it the ancient and accepted Scottish rite and sent it back to France, where the survivors of the Reign of Terror, the French Revolution, received it. Today it rules European Masonry. So what I am saying here, just years earlier, before 1801, in 1796 and 1792, I'll give you the exact dates, the secret societies and Freemasons of France, who caused the Reign of Terror, the Revolution, the same groups of people who came to America, started the Freemasonic lodges in Charleston, South Carolina, and all the other ones, were working to create a revolution, a civil war in the United States 60 years later. And they did. After they did the French Revolution, they did the United States Revolution. And these are the same people who brought about World War I and World War II. They just call it different names. The French Revolution, the Civil War, World War I, World War II. And they're plotting World War III. The same people are behind the scenes controlling our world now. I have all my notes here. Look at I've been doing some homework here and reading. I had to go on Wikipedia and other places to find the dates, but I have a story to tell you on this page here. So they called it the ancient and accepted Scottish rite in Charleston, this newly created Masonic Lodge organization, taking over the world, and sent it back to France, where the survivors of the Reign of Terror received it, and today it rules European Masonry. Wow. So I did look up some dates here. The widespread Civil War, Mr. Barron says, was September 5th, 1793. Which included the 1789, it was preceded by the 1789 beheadings in France. But the French Revolution was 1793 to 1794 was the French Revolution. Widespread Civil War, Reign of Terror. And then, of course, the Civil War in the United States was 1861. 6 years later, in 1865, so that lasted 4 years, and the Reign of Terror lasted in France, starting in 1789. The real murder began in 1793, the beheadings to 1794, and apparently involves these Freemasonic lodges and these other elites. So isn't that odd? And of course we know that after the Civil War, there was revolutions over there in Germany and other places preceding World War I and World War II. So these ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, which I guess it has nothing to do with Scotland, or ancient or accepted, these organizations with these elites. I guess one guy says here, Terra is nothing more than speedy, severe, and inflexible justice. I read it again. Terra is nothing more than speedy, severe, and inflexible justice. Thus an emanation of virtue applied to the most pressing need of the homeland. So when these people bring about these civil wars, revolution, world war wars, remember we got a lot of terror going on now in 2017. It's been going on quite a while. So I'll reread this again. Terror is nothing more than speedy, severe, and inflexible justice, thus an emanation of virtue. So the terrorism that they're doing today, these insane people from these secret societies think it's an emanation of virtue. And in the Kabbalistic secret doctrine teachings, the rays of God are an emanation of virtue applied to the most pressing need of the homeland. So these people who want to bring about a new age and new world order going on today seems to be connected with the 1789, 1793, 94 reign of terror, French Revolution. And then when they created the organizations in the United States, 1801, only 5 years later, they were plotting to divide and create a civil war in the United States. They managed to pull it off 60 years later, 59 years later. And we all know how horrible that was. And then, of course, 45, 50 years later, they are starting, 60 years later, they're starting World War I. And a few years later, they're starting World War II. And all kinds of wars in between. And it appears to be a type of a religious belief, which is background would be the Theophist Society information, Lucifer magazine, Secret Doctrine as I've been reading it. And maybe there's some lapover of some truth or good material, but I'm trying to get to what the occult means. What are they hiding and what is their plan? So I need to finish reading this page, which is quite interesting. Well, if you're watching my video, I hope you're following this conversation. As early as 1796, while John Jay was governor, Colonel Burr had various conversations with him on the subject of these Mexican provinces. So they were concerned about the land over there in Texas and New Mexico, whatever. Colonel Burr said he could revolutionize and take possession of South America. He started out talking about the King Charles of England, involved with the King of France, and the Vatican, and the Jesuits, and the Jewish people. Not all Jewish people. And probably not all kings across Europe. And not all the people in the Catholic Church. Apparently, when you get to the top levels, and it apparently has something to do with some secret religion, some kind of maybe bloodline. Maybe some people who are not all type O positive blood or something. Maybe it's RH or some kind of hybrid creatures or something biblical, descendants of Cain, as per the Rosicrucians, versus the rest of the people being descendants of Abel. Or I shouldn't say Abel, Seth, because Cain, who was supposedly fathered by Satan, Sataniel, apparently, according to the Rosicrucian material, abandoned Eve in the Garden of Eden, so God created Adam to replace Sataniel, who was half divine, according to the Rosicrucian material. And Cain was jealous of the son Abel they had, so he killed him, the first murder. So Adam and Eve had a second son named Seth, and apparently, according to the Rosicrucian material and other stuff, this is just one of the stories. But most of us are descendants of Seth, human and human, and some of us are descendants of Cain, who was Sataniel from God's world, and Eve, who was made of clay and dirt of the earth, human and divine. So when they talk about bloodlines in the Rosicrucian material, that's one explanation. Trying to get to the bottom of this occult, secret, mysterious, mystery religion. All right, so Colonel Burr, back in 1796, is talking about revolutionizing the Mexican provinces and taking possession of South America. Burr was actively engaged during the years 1805 to 1806 in traversing the western country. Previous to the cessation of Louisiana, Baron Bastrop contracted with the Spanish government for land near the Natchtorches, exceeding 30 miles square. The Spanish government granted to Bastrop 1,200,000 acres. Colonel Lynch paid Bastrop about $100,000 for 6/10 of it, and Burr paid Lynch $50,000 for half of Lynch's purchase. General Wilkinson detailed to Burr the facilities which would probably be afforded by the inhabitants in effecting a revolution. Burr writes to his daughter in August 1805, "I now have 150 miles of wilderness to encounter." Colonel Burr was arrested as a traitor on the Tom Bigby River, Mississippi Territory. The above excerpts are taken from the memoirs of Aaron Burr and his friend M.L. Davis, promiscuously pages 374 to 383, Volume 2, and they prove that Burr's object in raising troops at Blanacet was the disruption of the Union and a slave empire west of the Mississippi to include Mexico and Central America, then belonging to Spain. Interesting. This he was tried for his life, but he was acquitted for want of overt treasonable acts. And I'm aware that, like Albert Pike after the Civil War was a general for the South, he was arrested, but the president from the North pardoned him. Both were Masons. So I suspect that's what's going on here with these conspirators behind the scenes. They forgive each other like we see in politics today. Before his trial, we read in the memoirs, page 383, a letter was delivered by Stuart to General Wilkinson, written in cipher. Bernard and Gasset say it was in the Royal Arch Freemasonic cipher. So they were using the Freemasonry verbiage or cipher as code. And as Burr had been on the staff of Benedict Arnold, a Mason and a traitor, these facts furnish probable proof that Burr's conspiracy was a Masonic conspiracy, if you were wondering what all that was about. So this author's obviously a much smarter man than me, done all this research into this topic. These things going on to divide the United States and the Mexican provinces, territories, are Masonic conspiracies. But the crowning proof is this. By universal Masonic law, but one supreme body can be in one nation. So we got a problem here in the United States. The supreme body apparently controlling our country are these Masonic secret societies. But the Charleston Supreme Council made the United States the sole exception. In 1813, 12 years from its origin, it created a Supreme Council, Northern jurisdiction, located in New York, limited to the United States north of the Ohio and east of the Mississippi. The very division contemplated by Burr and afterward attempted by Jeff Davis and Alexander Stephens' Confederacy by repealing the Missouri Compromise and the Stephens words attempting an empire whose cornerstone is slavery. So I know Albert Pike was the leader of the southern jurisdiction of Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. And apparently there was another jurisdiction called the northern jurisdiction in New York. So they wanted to divide the United States into the northern jurisdiction of Scottish Rite of Freemasonry and the southern jurisdiction, of which Albert Pike was a general and a leader of the Freemasons. And the cornerstone for the South was to be slavery. So isn't it interesting? Everybody thinks the war was fought to end slavery, but the real truth was, it's according to this here, is they actually wanted to divide it into two countries and bring about slavery. Just pondering here, because I'm trying to see how it relates to what's going on today. I am aware, and this is probably another interesting note, but in my previous videos from the Encyclopedia Judaica, on the topic of anti-Semitism, it says in there that General Ulysses Grant, General Order Number 11, December 17, 1862, ordered the expulsion of all Jews from the Department of Tennessee, which included Kentucky and Mississippi. That was in December 17, 1862. The General Ulysses Grant ordered the expulsion of all Jews from the Department of Tennessee, which is Tennessee, Kentucky, and Mississippi. The Civil War was from 1861 to 1865, so the second year into the Civil War, the Jews were expelled. And apparently it was the Jewish leadership that created all these Freemasonic lodges. And they had a lot of control over leaders and of our government and financial institutions, etc. Wow. But the Jefferson's patriotism and Jackson's courage and decision, the attempt would have been made years before by the Calhoun's nullification. Indeed, the hopes and predictions of monarchist, papist, and anarchist of Europe, the hopes and predictions of monarchist, that's some elitist family ruling a country, papist, that's the Pope ruling countries, anarchist, those are the people trying to cause all kinds of anarchy, which George Bush Sr. said, out of chaos and anarchy will come the New World Order of Europe. From the first were that the United States, this is the hopes and dreams of these monarchists, papists, and anarchists, that the United States would split on the Ohio and Mississippi, shut off New England and her principles between the Atlantic and the St. Lawrence, Mississippi, and Ohio, and leave the whole vast South and West, its soil, climate, mines to slavery, the lodge, the priest, and the mob. What a crazy story, you think? So the hopes and predictions of the monarchists, the papists, and the anarchists of Europe from the first were that the United States would be split on the Ohio, Mississippi, shut off New England and her principles between the Atlantic and St. Lawrence, Mississippi, and Ohio, and leave the whole vast South and West, its soil, climate, and mines to slavery, the lodge, the priest, and the mob. Does this sound familiar? why they're creating terror. And I read what that meant. Terror is nothing more than speedy, severe, and inflexible justice, thus an emanation of virtue applied to the most pressing need of the homeland. I showed you here, prior to the Civil War was the French Revolution, the reign of terror. Very similar situations controlled and contrived by the same forces. Now, considering that Charleston's Supreme Council Masonically divided our Union in 1813, so they already Masonically divided it. So they were putting the heads, the leadership there from the different lodges. But remember, it's all one puppet master. By these very lines, considering that Aaron Burr, using the Masonic cipher, was attempting precisely the same rending of the Union at the same time. So let's see. That was in 1813. 1861, the Civil War was off. So 40 years later, something, 50 years later. It was a plan. See, a lot of us, we people, we don't see these things in the scope of 50, 60 years or 100 years. The people behind the scenes, they do see it that way. They understand it has to be gradual change or the people will catch on. Reminds me of the boiling the frog story. If you toss a frog into boiling water, he's going to leap out. But if you throw him into some cool water and turn the burner up slowly, eventually he will be boiling. He will not leap out. You have to go really slow to bring about these things. And they do use some quick moves like 911, bombs and terrorism. And it makes a huge advance in the program when they do that. Like 911 did. It allowed these people to make a lot of, accomplish a lot of their goals in the Middle East, which is just one part of the program. They're not just looking over there. This is a new world order, globalism in a new age, destroying Christianity, even the Muslims, Islamic religion. Aleister Crowley says negative things about the Hindus and the Buddhists. Considering that afterwards our Union was rent by the lodge room conspiracies of the South, considering that our Congress upheld slavery till Lincoln took the helm, and Seward, Sumner, Wilson, Stevens, Stanton, and Chase, I'm thinking about Chase Bank, all of whom were anti-Masons, controlled Congress. And again, these people, they may call themselves anti-Masons, but it just seems to be just like the divide of the Freemasons into the northern jurisdiction, southern jurisdiction. The north against the south, but the leaders all came from the Freemasons, and they all pardoned each other. And considering that our war was a failure till Grant took the sword, so Grant took the sword, and I'm thinking about, I just read to you Ulysses Grant banning, exiling the Jews from the Tennessee Territory, which included Kentucky and Mississippi. Why did he do that? And why did the war become a success when Grant took the sword? Did he know how to win? Did somebody at the top make a decision who would win? Who left his dying testimony against the lodge, and above all, so was Grant against the lodge, and is he the one who banished the Jews from the Tennessee territories? Considering that the ecclesiastical despot and master of the Jesuits at Rome was the only European power which reached his arm across the Atlantic to recognize the rebellion and rend the Union. Lying all these considerations together, that mind must be weak, ignorant or worse, which does not see in that Charleston Supreme Council of 1801 and its ancient and accepted Scottish rite, a devil's government with a devil's gospel, and the subterranean lodges sprang from it, and the strong words of Lamartine, the catacombs of a new worship. Do you see the flow here? The catacombs of a new worship. And if you're a Christian, you know a little bit about the Bible. You know about these prophesied events and how it does have a religious connection. And part of that is to discredit, eliminate the memory of Jesus from society, rewriting history. The catacombs of new worship, which worship was that of a naked woman, a goddess of reason in the Champ de Mars, a religion which Frenchmen shudder to remember, a religion which Frenchmen shudder to remember, which filled France with terror and bathed it in the blood. So the reign of terror caused by these same people was to worship that of a naked woman, the goddess of reason. And what's that have to do with that word we were talking about earlier in that document? These Kabbalistic ideas of connecting some kind of Holy Spirit in your sexual experience with another person. We've got so much more here to read and connect the dots. It's incredible. But was not General Jackson a Mason? And were not all his cabinet honorary members of Federal Lodge in the city of Washington? Answer, this is all true. So look, it was a conspired event, just like in France and everywhere else in the world. There is a puppet master controlling the left and the right. Whatever names you want to give things. Even the people with the recent demonstration protest in Richmond, Virginia and Alabama, where the white supremacists, White Lives Matter were marching, and then showed up the Black Lives Matter, then showed up the KKK, then showed up the Women's March, then showed up the gay rainbow parades. They're doing all of this. The Hegelian dialectic. Nothing is new. This is all true, but Jackson firmly believed in Christ. So even like President John Kennedy, who was his father, Joseph Kennedy, he belonged to these organizations, call them things like the mafia groups or Kabbalistic secret society organizations. But like Jackson here, he believed in Christ, to whom he humbly professed conversion before he died. So even like President John Kennedy, you can come from these families and get into positions of power. But if you don't go along, you will be assassinated, destroyed. And he was a firm believer in the Union. So even in these secret societies and their plans, things can go wrong because all parties may not go along. And through ignorance in many respects, he was fearless and faithful to the government and regretted that he had not hung John C. Calhoun for attempting its dissolution. You can probably find this Freemasonry Illustrated. His Secretary of State, and was a champion of the Lodge of Poinsett and introducing a new rite into Mexico, while Livingston, so Jackson, who was trying to keep the United States together, sorry I get a little messed up here sometimes, General Jackson, leader of the United States. But while Livingston, his Secretary of State, so his own Secretary of State, was a champion of the Lodge in Poinsett by introducing a new rite into Mexico, caused a series of bloody revolutions in that unhappy country. So what's the spillover of these Freemasonic plans, activities? The bloody revolutions of the unhappy country of Mexico. Of the Masons in the United States, it had been estimated that only about 1 in 5 habitually attend a lodge meeting. Habit. The lodges are mainly supported by the 4/5 who are non-attendants, who pay dues to avoid lodge vengeance. As a rule, the 1/5 who attend the meetings share the income among themselves, while the absentee lodge members pay it. How many people know that? There are, however, exceptions. A physician had charge of the post hospital near Little Rock, Arkansas, the hometown for Bill Clinton. An orderly had arrested a rebel who had murdered his Union neighbor, robbing him of $2,000. The physician was a high Mason, and one day the rebel robber and murderer called on the doctor for a private interview. When the following dialogue took place, listen up here. I've been saying this is what's happening, and it is happening, in my opinion. So the rebel says to the doctor, "I am complicated in this murder case and am arrested by the orderly. Can you help me?" So apparently, put it in my words, the sheriff or the police arrested this guy for the murder and the theft of the $2,000. The doctor, who's a Mason, and this guy is a Mason, this rebel, "Well, did you kill him?" And the rebel says, "Yes." And the doctor says, "Well, did you get the $2,000? And the rebel says, "Yes." The doctor says, "Well, what do you expect me to do?" The rebel says, "That you will aid in extraditing me according to our obligations as Masons." The doctor, "You infamous puppy, you," that's what he calls this rebel. "If you expect me to make such a use of my Masonry, for once you have mistaken your man. I will endeavor to be up to Little Rock at your hearing and have a word to say." The orderly took the rebel up to Little Rock, and the Masonic Union cleared him. Yep, the Masonic Union cleared him. The rebel was a true Mason. The surgeon was a patriot. Like instances to this are at hand which would fill a moderate volume. So like instances are at hand, according to this author in 1905, would fill a volume. There were Masons and Roman Catholics who were good men and patriots, as there were in the New Testament pagan centurions who received Christ. But neither the lodge or the confessional is Christian or American. We have seen from its history, given by its own authors, that this ancient and accepted Scottish rite is not ancient, but modern, not accepted, but invented, not Scottish, but French, and so one continuous falsehood. But its most revolting feature are yet to be drawn. Destroying records is a confessing crime. So apparently all these activities about revolutions, I'm going to have to stop reading, regrettably. There's much more here I'd like to read. But apparently in the Charleston, South Carolina, if I were to continue reading here, there's a lot of talk about all of the records from the Freemasonic lodges from 1801 to 1860 ceased to exist. They were all burnt. Somebody did not want this information published. And one other thing I'll go talk to, because I did talk about this document when I started. Wanted to make sure you understood where I'm coming from. I still have other research to do here, but in that word, sex and the Shekinah, and the second page was the Ark of the Covenant. And in the picture here of a Freemasonic lodge is the Ark of the Covenant in the corner. And so much other symbolism. And again, as I said at the beginning of this video, it is a daunting challenge to try to figure this stuff out. And the only thing you can do is just to take your time and go to one video at a time. You can make a list of my videos. Go to my website, rickmiracle.com, so you can have a cheat sheet. I got to update the information there. I've made more videos since. But it's a good guide that you can then highlight in yellow or mark it up and go to watch different kinds of videos on different books, or use the list to buy the books yourself, or watch other authors from that list. Go watch some of their videos, what they speak. It is a lot of work to try to get your mind wrapped around this. But remember, these people with these secret societies, these organizations, even from the Vatican or the Zionists, and the things going on today with 911, and likely some kind of big event to bring about an acceleration to this new age and new world order. These people have planned and plotted for a long time and do things. They live by these activities. And even whatever it has to do with these things with pedophilia and Pizzagate and gay agenda and trying to bring these terror events around to us, trying to disarm we people in this country, and so much more, dumping chemicals in the sky, microwave transmitters coming online. I was watching some videos this morning in different towns across America that people were outraged overnight. They wake up the next morning and 100 feet from their house is a cell phone tower looking like a telephone pole or a flag pole and other things, even offering churches to put something up with a cross up there with the church name, and it would be a microwave transmitter. So with all this crazy stuff going on back then with the technologies they had back then, and apparently their plot for dominating the world and enslaving the people, like the Hunger Games movie or Divergent, apparently none of that thinking has changed. Only thing that's changed is they have better weapons. They're more educated on how to mind control we the people. Anyways, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Thank you for watching my video. Rick Miracle reporting.